It was the kind of invitation no one expected anymore, handwritten, sealed in wax and smelling faintly of old lavender and something metallic. Elena received hers on a stormy Thursday evening. The envelope was pale ivory, the ink deep crimson. Inside it read, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Adrian Thorne and Liliana Marrow. Midnight. Marrow Estate. No date. No RSVP. Just the time. Midnight." The Marrow family had been a strange whisper in town for generations. Reclusive, wealthy, and the subject of countless rumors, they lived in the manor nestled deep in the hills, far from roads, lights, or modernity. Elena was Adrian's cousin, though they hadn't spoken in years. Still, something about the letter compelled her. A chill ran down her spine, but her hands moved on their own, setting the envelope aside, already thinking of what to wear. When she arrived at the estate that night, the fog was thick, curling like fingers around the iron gates. The manor loomed ahead, gothic and decayed, yet grand in its refusal to die. Soft candlelight glowed from the high windows, casting flickers across the warped glass. She wasn't alone. Other relatives stood silently by their cars, equally confused, equally drawn in. Inside, the house smelled of roses and damp stone. Ancient portraits watched them from the walls, their eyes just a little too sharp, a little too knowing. A string quartet played in a minor key, eerie and mournful. Everyone was dressed as if attending a funeral, not a wedding. Then came the bride, Liliana. Pale as frost, with silver eyes and a smile too wide. Her dress shimmered like wet bone. As she passed, the room grew cold. No one spoke, not even the groom. And the clock began to chime. Midnight was near. The final stroke of midnight echoed like a death knell through the Marrow estate. The guests, now numbering barely 24, were ushered wordlessly from the grand hall into a deeper chamber of the manor, one no one remembered seeing on the way in. It was narrow, candlelit, with stone walls that glistened as though slick with moisture. A stale, iron-sweet smell clung to the air. At the center of the room stood an altar carved from black stone, veined with crimson. Strange symbols had been etched into its surface, pulsing faintly as if alive. Liliana and Adrian stood side by side in front of it. The groom's eyes were vacant, as if he were dreaming with his eyes open. Liliana's gaze, however, scanned the crowd like a predator selecting her prey. An elderly man emerged from the shadows, draped in robes that whispered as he walked. His face was obscured by a veil of netted fabric, but his voice rang with clarity and age. He spoke no words of love, no blessings of union. Instead, he chanted in a guttural language none of the guests could place, something ancient and wrong. The air thickened and a low humming buzzed at the edge of everyone's hearing, burrowing into their skulls. Elena reached for her cousin's hand, but he didn't move. She tried to speak, to whisper, "What is this?" But her voice cracked like dry leaves. Around her, the guests stood frozen, not by fear but by something deeper, compulsion. As if whatever was happening demanded their silence. Liliana produced a blade from beneath her gown. Thin, curved, and slick with a dark residue. She turned to Adrian and made a shallow cut across his palm. Blood welled and dripped onto the altar. The stone drank it like it was starving. The room trembled. Something was waking beneath them. The ground beneath their feet pulsed, not like an earthquake but like a heartbeat, slow and deep, as if the earth itself were alive and listening. Elena felt it throb in her chest, echoing through her ribs like a second rhythm. The other guests remained still, their eyes wide yet unblinking. No one moved. No one spoke. Liliana turned, her silver eyes gleaming in the flickering candlelight. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and chillingly melodic. "Tonight, the union of blood and shadow is complete," she said, holding up the curved blade. "The Marrow line returns to its origin. To the old root." The veiled priest nodded and stepped back as Liliana approached the guests. She began calling out names, old family names Elena hadn't heard in years. Each time she spoke one, a person stepped forward as if in a trance. They lined up silently before the altar, each cutting their own palm with the offered blade, letting their blood join Adrian's in the grooves of the stone. Elena backed up slowly, panic rising in her throat. This wasn't a wedding. It was a ritual, a blood rite. She turned to leave, but the entrance had vanished. The chamber was now sealed, the stone walls bare of doors or windows. Trap. She pressed her back against the cold wall and scanned the room. Her eyes landed on a small mural above the altar, so ancient it was barely visible. But the shapes were unmistakable. A monstrous figure rooted into the ground, fed by the blood of its descendants. It had dozens of arms, and a face that looked horrifyingly familiar. It was Adrian. Or what he would become. The truth slammed into her. This wedding wasn't about love. It was about awakening something. Feeding it. And her family's blood was the key. Elena's breath came in ragged bursts. The chamber stank of iron and rot now, thick as syrup. As the blood pooled and flowed into the altar's grooves, the stone began to shift. It didn't crack, it unfolded. Like the surface of the earth peeling back to reveal something it was never meant to show. A deep fissure opened behind the altar, revealing a stairwell that spiraled downward into blackness. The guests who had given their blood began to descend wordlessly, like sleepwalkers. Adrian moved with them, his eyes still vacant, his feet dragging like a puppet on strings. Liliana stayed behind, her gaze fixed on Elena. "You carry the last of the pure blood," she whispered, walking slowly toward her. "You're not here by chance, Elena. The root remembers you." Elena backed away, trembling. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Your grandmother severed the bond a generation ago," Liliana said, voice laced with reverence and resentment. "She fled this place and buried your legacy. But the root always finds its own. It called you back." Suddenly, cold, claw-like hands grabbed Elena from behind, two of the guests who hadn't bled yet. Their faces were blank, lips slightly parted as if waiting for a command. Elena struggled, kicking and screaming, but they held fast. Liliana approached, raising the blade again. "This is not death," she said softly, pressing the edge to Elena's palm. "This is rebirth. You will feed the root, and through you it will live again." The blade cut deep. Elena cried out as blood spilled freely, trickling into the altar. The tremors grew violent. Below, the sounds of chanting rose, voices that no human throat could form. The air turned bitter cold. And from the dark stairwell, something was crawling up. Something ancient, hungry, and impossibly alive. From the stairwell, the thing emerged, not walking but slithering, dragging itself with limbs that moved in unnatural directions. It was a mass of sinew, bone, and faces. Human faces, weeping, screaming, or grinning maniacally, fused together like wax near a flame. Its eyes were hundreds, glowing red, blinking out of sync, scattered across its shifting form like stars in a bleeding sky. The guests dropped to their knees, their arms raised in worship. Adrian's voice, monotone and hollow, joined the rising chant. "The root returns. The root returns." Elena stumbled backward, clutching her bleeding hand. Her blood still dripped into the altar, which now pulsed like a living heart. She understood now. The root fed on bloodlines, on the essence of its descendants. This wasn't a one-time ritual. It was a cycle, one that repeated every generation, binding her family to this horror again and again. "No," she whispered. "I won't be part of this." Something in her blood must have defied it. The root hesitated. Its grotesque body writhed at the edge of the altar, uncertain. Liliana's expression faltered. "You resist," she snarled, stepping forward. "But your blood belongs to it." "No," Elena said again, stronger this time. She reached down and smeared her blood across the mural of Adrian, the figure rooted into the earth. She didn't know why, but something in her told her the blood could also end this. The altar screamed. Not audibly, but in her mind, ripping through her skull. The creature convulsed, its faces twisting in agony. The guests collapsed. Adrian clutched his head and fell to the ground. The root thrashed, then began to rot before her eyes, its bodies decaying, its limbs shriveling. It collapsed into ash and bone, and the chamber began to crumble. Elena ran, blinded by dust, deafened by cracking stone. She didn't stop until she burst through the manor's front doors and into the cold dawn. Behind her, the Marrow estate collapsed in on itself, vanishing into the ground, as if it had never existed. But Elena knew the truth. The root was gone.